At the same time, we've been trying to incorporate the work done by the court and more. I will rapidly give the floor now to Mr. Mazet because we are running short of time. Mr. Mazet, did you want to comment on that, on the work of the court? Yes, but I think that I will, well, very simply confirm what was said before. I will certainly follow the reasoning followed before, and especially I will agree with the methodology, and I'd like to share with you some reflections that I've had when analysing the different environmental laws and especially in the framework of a course on the internationalization of the law. When talking about instruments that allow us to manage multilingual concepts, I'd like to say some words about the concept of multilingual anthology. This could be defined as a set of terms that can be used to describe objects and connections or relations in certain areas. But an anthology is not limited to a set of terms or words. It should be perceived as a semantic network in the frame of which each term acquires or clarifies its meaning through the connections it has with other terms. If, for instance, I use the concept waste, a certain number of other terms can be connected. Processing, storage, Directive of 3rd of February 92, Article L 541 of the Environmental Law, nuclear waste, Vienna Convention, etc., etc. This is a semantic field that can be ordered following a certain legal reasoning materialized by a set of semantic relationships. So these information will be presented in the format of natural language text in a set of words, international or supranational standards, derived law, national law, case law in the different countries, or international case law as well as arbitration judgments. As I said, this is presented in the format of text in natural language, and the anthology will be elaborated based on this information, these different data. So the terminology of the domain will be used to conceptualize the objects present in that domain in a language presenting the knowledge called a conceptual graph. This conceptual graph will be a tool to model the texts and give a certain mapping of the words in this specific field. So the graph is a set of words and qualified semantic relationships. They can be specific or generic in the order of legal semantics. They can be synonymity relationships, anthology relationships, information relationships, and these relationships testify of the usual practice among lawyers, such as the qualification of facts, analogy, extension, a contrario reflection, etc., etc. So these graphs represent semantic networks destined to structure and organize information within a group of data, and they are the ultra-dense core of legal information contained in the text. The idea is to allow the machine to better exploit different contents, providing a conceptual vocabulary that has been structured and well-defined. The anthology will provide the user with an intellectual ergonomy when the user is at a loss when confronted with the inflation of EU law. The construction of the anthology includes first a linguistic chapter which is dedicated to the definition of terminological resources. The idea is to identify the relevant legal concepts in several languages, in the 24 languages, French, English, and so on. The passage to the foreign language versions will not be translated, will not be limited to a simple translation or literal translation. Indeed, when it comes to the concepts involving, in most cases, access to a functional equivalence, in other words, a concept that is different from a language or linguistic point of view, but that has the same objective, to use a certain methodology. It is imperative. We need the equivalence, the concordance, the proximity to be used. So this relation or relationing will apply to the concept, but also to the semantic field around the concept in order to expand the concept and its related terms. This requires, of course, the action of multilingual lawyers, experts. After that, we need to structure the concepts, and this using relations such as the ones I mentioned, inclusion and so on, in order to define the graph or the semantic fields. This is a way to develop a cognitive relationship, because it is the expertise, the know-how of the lawyer that will command the placement of the different concepts. So he will contribute to creating an order within these different concepts in a European perspective. And from a purely IT perspective, the idea is to develop a language to exploit the knowledge organized in graphs. In other words, it is important to be able to navigate through the graphs using the semantic definitions to reason either through deduction or induction from a concept, exploring its semantic field, and starting, for instance, from waste, we could, come to the prohibition of storage of illegal waste, for instance. So this multilingual interface instrument will have to be built in order to report in the most relevant way of the connections between the different laws examined. The connection between the graphs and especially the connection in the different language versions will allow for a proper correspondence of the legal systems they represent. Therefore, using his own system, the user will be able to access the knowledge within the foreign legal system, and navigating within the graphs and using the interconnection between the graphs, he will be able to identify equivalence or analogy or non-concordance between the legal systems, or lack of correspondence between them. Now, there are two types of access to information. The first one is a simple access to the texts and the doctrine, characterized by a compilation of documents. That is, in fact, the current state of affairs in most legal databases. And even though these systems allow for access to different legal instruments at different levels of relevance, it does not fully satisfy or meet the needs of users who look for a concrete and precise answer in a given and concrete problem. So a system that would not give an exhaustive answer to the problem put by putting in contact the existing text would be problematic. This is particularly important when it comes to compared law. Hence the need to develop systems that make it possible to access knowledge beyond information. In other words, we need access to data, but also to the links and the interdependencies between these data. From a methodological point of view, this is the concept and the design that was adopted to develop anthologies. Reflections and work that are articulated around the definition of the terminology of a certain field. This is environmental law, for instance, or other. When we talk about global law, we have three areas mainly. We have environmental law, because it cannot be regulated nationally, so it is at the very least regional, if not international. We have international trade, because we have the World Trade Organization, and we have human rights as well, that have a universal character, and that are therefore part of an international conception. So to report on the meaning and the significance of a legal text using semantic connections, such as saying concept is or belongs to, is not enough. We need to confirm the relevance of this connection between concepts in a more specific way. So group, class action, action civile publica, or the environmental prejudice, the interesse diffuso, etc., are concepts that have a specific meaning in the legal order. This is why it is essential to take into consideration the existing anthologies and graphs, and we need to take into consideration the description of these concepts. The inclusion will testify of the process, and the qualification will determine the factual element in the text. So radioactive waste will be included from Article 542 of environmental law. On the other hand, the taxonomic hyponymy will allow to classify in given categories. For instance, well, toxic waste will include a certain number of them. There are other semantic connections. For instance, a factual value given to a text, 15 days to define a reasonable time limit. This is a concept in Anglo-Saxon law. But if a legal decision considers that 15 days is a reasonable time limit, it is a qualified fact. Also, the quotation of parts of texts or the incorporation of a legal definition are also part of the action. And this is why it is so important to work with lawyers, experts, even lawyer linguists and connecticians in certain cases. This will be used to order a given legal field, or to create tools that will be useful for consulting texts, or as an instrument to index the texts. In a more evolutive perspective, this mode of treatment of legal vocabulary could be imagined applying what has been developed with web semantic. Indeed, based on the HTML and RDF functionalities, the semantic web will use the descriptive cognitive techniques, and despite the fact that the law presents formal characteristics that are different according to the source, the domain or field covered can lead to a modeling of legal data, and this can be directly understood by the machines. This requires a definition of the concepts and the terms and a representation in XML language of the concepts stored in XDF. But a deeper knowledge of these legal terms shows that formalizing is possible according to the source, the matter, and the object of the text. Indeed, the norms are characterized by a certain degree of formal content. The texts contain the same elements without variation, and they are all contributing to one unity: chapters, sections, paragraphs, etc. So the method recommended would be one to translate the structural characteristics of legal texts in order to convert them into XML tags, and all the tags present in one document could then allow us to classify this in a written category in the format of XDF, and then this would lead to a definition sequence in RDF, which would help us well, simply list the text, classify the text that has its attributes in XML. Once the information has been obtained, with the tags and definitions, we could relate the information. This new methodology would then benefit from the addition of anthologies drafted in a first stage. Indeed, the structuring of descriptors in anthologies in upstream and downstream inclusion, analogies, and information would then be used as tags and XML tags using the bottom-up hierarchical method. This is a proposal of methodology, and this proposed methodology should normally allow to connect and certainly not work on the expression of the concept, but rather on the concepts themselves and certainly on the semantic field that surrounds these legal concepts. Thank you.